Nichols and I started Friends Indeed at the height of the AIDS epidemic. It was a time when not a week went by that you didn't hear of someone you either knew or knew of who died of AIDS. I mean, it was a calamitous time. New York City was filled with primarily young men at that time who were HIV positive, had AIDS, and had little to no support around them. Many of them came from other parts of the country, homophobic parts of the country for one thing. There were many families in small towns in the South and the Midwest who got a phone call telling them that their child was both gay and HIV positive in the same phone call. And one of the things I noticed, particularly visiting the first person, a man named Archie, whom I became very close to, and I really was on his whole journey with him. When I would visit Archie in the hospital, and I would walk down the hallways of AIDS units, and I would see pass room after room with a young, very ill man lying in a bed alone in a room. I just saw it so often, and it just was heartbreaking. Well, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a place that people, that all these people dealing with this frightening virus could come and talk about it freely, could talk about dying. Not many places you can talk about dying. People don't want you to talk about it. They want to tell you, you're not going to. A place you could talk about it, and it could be talked about as a natural part of life instead of as some horror that can't even be named. We need a place where people can do that, and where maybe we could support and empower people to get to the place that Archie was, which is to not be afraid of it, to live life as fully as possible, however long that's going to be, and not live life in terror of what's coming. And we need a place like that. So I knew that the best person in the world that I knew to talk about this was Mike Nichols, who'd been a friend my entire New York life. And I knew that there's no way in the world that I could have created a place on my own, but I knew with Mike's help we could. So I had a fateful lunch with Mike Nichols, where I sat down and I told him the whole thing, and I said, I think there needs to be a place where we can do this. And Mike said, I've been feeling I needed to do something, but I haven't known what to do. Thank you. And we went to work. Friends Indeed is a crisis center, and we are working with people who are dealing with life-threatening illnesses, with caregivers, and people who are dealing with grief and bereavement. So obviously we are dealing with the very toughest stuff. The thing that's absolutely unique about us, as any information I have about any place else in the world, we do not separate people into categories. We do not do a support group for men with AIDS as opposed to a support group for women with breast cancer, as opposed to someone who just lost their mother, as opposed to someone who's caregiving their dying lover. We put everyone in the same room, because when you put everybody together, there is an enormous sense of our collective humanity, and people begin to hear that regardless of their story, regardless of the facts of what is going on in their life, we are all the same. It is all the same. It's all the same. If my heart is broken because my lover just died, or my heart is broken because my cancer has come back and they're telling me it's inoperable, or whatever, the feelings are the same. The story is the story, but the feelings, the human part of it is identical. I think for many, many of our clients, the big group is the safest room they know, which there are 6 of every week. We hope eventually to have even more. They are the main ones where everyone comes together. Then the outreach program, where clients who are either homebound or in hospitals and can't get to the big groups, we go to them. And the truth is, it isn't really what you say or do in a hospital room. It's the quality of your presence. The best thing you can do in a hospital room is be there. One of the things we do is go with people to their doctors. Sometimes we go people who are having a procedure that's scary and upsetting, and it's just very helpful to have somebody come with you. And also just to sit with the doctor and have someone who is not emotionally involved listen to what the doctor's saying. Because when you're frightened, it's sometimes very hard to really even hear the doctor, what they're telling you. We also have one-on-one crisis counseling. Sometimes when people are really, really up against it in a particular moment in time, and the groups are very helpful, but it also can be useful to sit down with a counselor one-on-one for a session or 2 or 3 or 4. We don't do long-term therapy, but we just work with someone long enough to get them on the other side of the immediacy of the crisis they're in. That is what we do. We manage terror. We manage fear. People come in on their hands and knees so frightened they're not functioning. And if they hang around us for a while, that will probably get better. Well, whenever we hear anybody say that the AIDS epidemic is over with, my first question is, what planet are you living on? It's not over at all. We have newly diagnosed people in Friends Indeed, I'd say every week. We are absolutely, have always been committed to every service at Friends Indeed is free, absolutely free of charge. Because the minute it weren't, there would start being people, there would start being a barrier. We just absolutely do not want to put a financial barrier up to anyone. So we don't, and we never have, and we won't. So, and people get astounded by that. Particularly like, you mean, well, how much is the crisis counseling? It's free. How much is the massage? It's free. And at the end of groups, we say, if you are so moved and you'd like to drop a little something in the bucket when you go out the door, that we would be profoundly grateful, and our clients are wonderful, they do. The cost of doing all of this is a little under $1 million a year, which sometimes you look at, when you're trying to raise it, is an enormous sum. When other people, including ourselves, look at it and say, you do all that for only, for less than $1 million a year? How do you do it? Raising the money to keep this valuable work going burns up so many kilowatts of energy, And what all that energy could be used for, it would be nice if all that energy were on the programs, could be just on doing what we do. But it's okay. But we can do it. We have done it, and we'll do it. We'll keep doing whatever we have to do, and then maybe one day Santa Claus will come down our chimney and say, "Children, let me just take care of this." I think when we first signed that 10-year lease, I thought, well, we certainly aren't going to need to be here longer than that. We probably don't need to be here that long. Because the AIDS epidemic will be solved. And then, of course, what became clearer and clearer is everything we were doing is absolutely as necessary, as viable, as needed as it was then, it is today. The issues we deal with, illness, death, grief, there is no one on the planet who isn't going to have to deal with one or all of those issues in their lifetime. It's a given. We all have to deal with them. So I think, Friends Indeed is as viable now as it was the day we started. And I would love to see a Friends Indeed in every city and hamlet. I really would.